Hello and welcome to the show. You all know I love a good entrepreneur story. My guest today is Ellen Yen. She left her corporate job at 23 without a backup plan and is now the founder of Cubicle to CEO. Her community has more than 14,000 entrepreneurial students, and her podcast has over 1 million downloads. Here's her story. Ellen, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Lisa, so glad we could finally make time. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
I can tell you that you have the most lovely set of anyone I've ever interviewed. That's
Thank
because you've
you.
been doing your own thing for a long time. So let's jump right in. As I said, you've just accomplished so much, not only globally with all the decisions you made. I mean, it looks to me from the outside a lot of right decisions, but we'll talk about the things that didn't land quite as well. But most definitely your podcast and the decision to leave your corporate job and the community you've built around you globally and locally. So tell us just a bit about your start and what was the yearning to leave the job you had? And I'm guessing this is bigger than what you imagined it could be.
Absolutely. I always say, when you're making the decision to jump into your next thing, you can only really dream from the context of what you've already lived, right? So oftentimes we actually, subconsciously limit what is possible for us because we only know what we know then. And when I left my corporate job, I was 23 years old. I actually didn't leave my job to start a business, contrary to what most people assume. I actually left because the industry that I worked in was healthcare, and the marketing aspect of healthcare, which was my role at that job, was very creatively stifled. And I'm such a creative at heart that I knew long term that wouldn't be a good place for me to thrive. And so I left because I thought I was going to move to a bigger city, look in a bigger market, and maybe land a marketing role at a company whose values and vision kind of align more with mine. But in the process of job searching, I actually ended up landing my first freelance social media client in early 2018. And I kind of had this realization that, oh, I have this set of skills that I can monetize outside of a traditional 9 to 5 job. Why don't I continue down this path and just see where it goes in 6 months? If I don't like it, I can continue my job search. And so that's kind of how it started. Very, very small, very, one step at a time. But here we are 8 years later, and this company has evolved into so much more than I could have ever imagined on the onset.
It is taking something you enjoyed doing. That's the word, is monetize. I mean, we can monetize so many things, especially today digitally, from a space from anywhere in the world, which is different. As you know, I had my alphabet pillow business. It was something I like to do. I like to craft. I wanted to make extra money for my family, but I didn't have a marketing budget. So I got them on the Friends show. And that is something that, there's this, couldn't have planned it.
Yeah.
Couldn't have imagined that I could still talk about that today and that would give me cred. So when you think about the people, when you were going through that step by step by step, you didn't have a marketing plan because you hadn't planned it, and you're a marketer who would have usually thought, I need a plan.
Yeah, I am someone who very much is intuition led. And so I have a very strong trust in my gut instincts. And so for me, I've actually never been super held up in the planning phase. I found out a few years ago that my human design means that I'm someone who actually learns life through experiments. And so that makes a lot of sense for me because I have an idea and then I'll pursue it, I'll experiment with it. And that experiment is what leads me to say either, okay, my expectation was correct, or no, I need to go in a different direction. I kind of let those little pivots guide me along the path.
So what was it that made you decide? You said you gave yourself a 6 month limit. You had the one client. What was it, the shift that made you decide, I'm going to keep going with this and see where it goes?
So pretty early on, I landed 2 more clients, and the second one that I landed was actually a huge account. It ended up being my largest client when I had a done for you social media marketing agency, and that was my first 2 years of business. And so this client, I mean, they blew up as a brand. They kind of pioneered the cauliflower pizza crust category in grocery stores. So I was traveling all over the country with them, going to different expos. I helped the founder write parts of her cookbook. I, was running social strategy for their e-com brand. And then from there, it really continued to grow. And by the time I actually chose to shut down my agency, we had worked with dozens of clients in our portfolio across all different sorts of industries and categories. And so I learned a lot in those first 2 years of business, getting to be behind the scenes of so many different types of brands.
So when you do that, so you're having this huge success, some people would say, well, this is my gig. This is what I'm doing. I'm having all this success. But you shifted yet again. Tell us about the shift and why.
Yeah. So this again was something that was led more on instinct because on paper, it didn't make sense, right, to shift away from what was working. But I kind of came to this realization. So by the end of 2019, I had hired my first full-time employee. I had some contractors that I worked with as well. So I had a very small team, boutique social media agency. And I realized I'm kind of hitting the cap of the amount of clients we can serve within this model. If I want to continue to grow bigger and grow our client roster, I will need to scale a full agency. And when I was thinking about that, imagining myself 5 years from now, would I be satisfied and happy with my work if that was the type of business I had built for myself? I didn't feel super excited about it. And so I realized, even though this is successful, if where I'm going isn't where I actually want to go, what really is the point in continuing to do that? And so at that time, I had started my podcast, Cubicle to CEO. I had launched my first group program. They were very small things. I mean, collectively made probably $500 a month. It paled in comparison to obviously the revenue that the agency was generating. But I felt such a spark and excitement for this side of my work. And I was like, I really want to mentor and educate more people on how they can scale and build their service-based businesses. And so I made a pretty rash decision, actually drastic too, and I let go of all but one of my clients, and I gave myself 30 days and I said, okay, you're going to have to make up for the income that you just lost through the education side of your business. And it was like, foot to the pedal right away. And by the turn of that, like by early 2020, I was full force in an education digital products business model. And within a few years at this point now, we've been able to serve over 14,000 entrepreneurs in our products and programs.
Wow. Amazing. I've been following you for a long time, and actually yours was one of the first programs I signed up for. And it was, I think, in 2020. I believe it was in 2020. So 5 years ago. And, I've been following you for a long time and paying a lot of attention to what you do. And so let's take a break. I want to talk specifically about the podcast.
Yeah.
And then the growth, the trajectory that you chose. I mean, some of it's happens and you follow your gut and go along with it, but some of it was actual, the decisions like you just described. So let's take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. We are back with Ellen. We've been talking about the trajectory of your career and leaving your job, taking on one marketing client that grew into more, and having a really successful agency and deciding to kind of burn it all down, as they say in the industry, keeping one client and then going on. So let's talk about your podcast, because there's a lot of, anyone can have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that a lot of people have them. I just reached my 20th episode, and you may or may not know the stats of this because you've had yours for so long, but 90% don't make it to the third episode. And of the 10% that do, only 10% of those make it to the 20th episode. It's something that we can start and finish, start and quit. It takes a while to gain traction, so people give up. And, what is it about the podcast that you started? Because let's talk about the numbers and how successful your podcast is. I mean, please, don't hold back, because you're an anomaly. Yet, I mean, you did the work, you put in the time, and the consistency is what it is more than anything. Of course, good content, but the consistency to bring that to the people who are wanting to hear from you.
You're so right, Lisa. And I think that consistency really is what has created the success in our podcast. So I launched my podcast July of 2019. At the time, it was just a passion project. I've always had a love for interviewing people. Growing up, I thought I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I actually originally went to college for broadcast journalism. And so this was kind of an avenue for me to explore that creative side of me, that skill, that passion. And we release episodes every Monday. And so for the last, it's been 6 years now since we launched that show. outside of a few intentional, I think maybe one intentional 1 month hiatus, and then maybe one other 2 week break, we have never missed a Monday in 6 years. And as you know, from being a podcast host who has hit that milestone of 20 episodes, which you are also so right, that is a rare milestone. There's so many podcasts that, kind of get abandoned in those early stages. It is a huge labor of love and a huge time, labor, and money investment, quite frankly, to produce this show on a weekly basis. But just like my business, the podcast has evolved so much. It started out as this way of networking and meeting founders in this space. And again, pursuing this passion of mine of interviewing people. And now it's become really what we're known for. Our podcast is our flagship product. It's what built Cubicle to CEO into a larger brand. We have over 1 million downloads in our lifetime worldwide.
Wow.
So that was something that took a lot of dedication. But, these days, the podcast is really known for our case studies. So we do behind the business case study interviews with founders where they cover one specific strategy that has grown either their time, their team, their revenue, profits, or their audience, and it really digs deep into one specific thing. So I always kind of joke, if you're a nosy person, you're probably going to like our show.
Well, and I do love your show probably for that reason. One of the things that I think too is so good about it is there's so many different ways to grow your business. And I think sometimes there's so many, we just kind of like chasing the shiny object. And I think listening to your show, you can listen to what works for one person. Like I could tell you the stories of how I used, media to get customers and clients to find my story, and how I understand that people buy from people and that they're going to buy from me because of the stories I'm telling, not necessarily because I have ideally I have the best product, but they're following the story and the person and having that connection.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to get there. And so if you were to say, what is the one thing that has helped you connect with the clients you've had over the years, the thousands of clients you've had over the years, what is the one thing that you've used? Of course, the podcast, but what is it that you would say is different about you and your business from all the others that are out there?
I think it's the transparency and the sustained practice of building in public. And I know that term has become kind of like corporate lingo and really popular over the last few years, but I really have been doing this process of building in public since I was, quite frankly, a teenager, right? My first content channel that I ever created, I was 13, 14 years old on YouTube. Of course, at the time doing something completely different. I was doing music covers and videos of that sort. But since I've been 14 years old and I'm now 31 years old, 16 years, I have been in some way, shape, or form sharing the process of what I'm working on and what I'm building and what I'm creating, and taking people behind the scenes with me, sharing data very openly. Like for years, I think for 5 years in a row, we actually shared our quarterly income reports. We opened our P&L statements and told people everything. And I think it's that level of transparency, and people who have almost like grown up with me in a way and seen me through different evolutions of my life that have, it's really built this deep level of trust that only time and, like you said, consistency can really do.
I paid you $97 a month for 12 months. When I would read those reports, I think I'm just like that much of the piece of that. I'm just this little, not even a sliver of the pie. But when you think about that and you build, revenue, monthly revenue, you build long-term revenue. Some people pay in full upfront. That's great. Sometimes you finance. That's great too. But to know that like that is the consistency that you can count on.
Yeah.
And then they have to be able to count on the consistency with you. Like I never came to one of your calls, your group calls, and thought I didn't get something from that.
Thank you.
But it's up to me to show up for it. It's up to me to plug in what you're teaching. And not everyone's going to do that either. So even if they think they don't get enough, which I'm not saying that they would say that about your program, but there's a lot of people who sign up for something and then they complain about it. But if you're not utilizing all that is offered to you, I mean, I'm a member of another community. I'm rarely in there, but it's so good, I'm not going to cancel. And I got in early. So I'm not giving up that early entry price that you know what I mean? So it's just, there's a lot to making the decisions about how you're going to grow your business. Another way that you've done it that I have such respect for and I just love because I'm a community minded person like you are is the in-person events that you hold and with such style. I mean, just colorful, just so inviting. I need to be at one of them because I look from the side and I can see all. I can't imagine the details that go into it, but I can a little bit because I've created community events as well. So let's take a quick break. I want to end on that, talking about the community events, and then also just there's come a time where I think people just want more of that. And you're answering the call. You have to ask your people what they want and then try your best to give it to them.
Absolutely.
We'll take a break. Be right back. We are wrapping up the conversation. I could talk to you for a very long time, Ellen Yin. Cubicle to CEO. So, one of the things we talked about was the huge success of your podcast. And one of the other things that you do so well that is, I believe, so needed, I hear a lot about it from my clients, is in person events. And you do them so well. So, tell me what made that decision? Were you hearing from your folks that that's what they were wanting? And then you go about delivering it in such a branded, styled way. I don't know if anyone does it as well as you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, I definitely know some companies who do it just as well on the branded side and that I've actually taken a lot of inspiration from. So, shout out to my girls at Create and Cultivate, especially. But as far as events, oh my goodness, this really has been such like a co-creation, I would say, with my community. I never really considered myself an events business. I still don't, but I really feel like events are such a great investment in relationship building and a give back really to your community to be able to gather them in one place and help foster those connections in person. So we've done a lot of pop-up smaller events over the years. I'm talking like 50-person events. We've done a series of live workshops, panels. We've done a coffee meetup before. So we've done definitely some of those smaller scale events. But this past September, I decided to host an event called Bloom Together. It was actually all centered around community building and how community building is your business's unique advantage in the age of AI and, short content and all of this, this change. People still, like you said, really crave that in person. And so we hosted a 200-person event. I had never hosted anything of this size, not even my wedding. My wedding was actually quite small. And so this was a brand new event experience for me, but we were so lucky and grateful to sell out all 200 seats, and we actually hosted it at a wedding venue. I kind of described it as a mix between like a mini conference meets a Bridgerton style, luxury garden party. And so, yes, the aesthetics and the florals and the branding were really a focal point. But at the end of the day, it was the people. I mean, we had people from all over my home state of Oregon, but we also had people traveling in from 15 other states and countries for literally a 4-hour evening soiree event. And I mean, I just still can't believe how people showed up for that.
And will you do more of it?
I do want to eventually host a full conference. I think that's my last big thing on my events bucket list. I don't know when, and we'll probably still do more, of those smaller events. But I don't think I'm shifting fully into the events business. It's a big investment of time and money. And, I said like last year for those 6 months that I was planning and marketing this event, it really became my whole personality. I felt like, that's all I talked about.
Well, and it is a production, right? It is a production. So yeah, I mean, I saw it from behind the scenes for sure. And it was only because it was on a date that I absolutely couldn't come or I would have been there. And I should have mentioned when we started that you're in Oregon because we're in Washington. So it's not that far for people to participate in the events that you hold if they're interested. And then just finally, we just have a couple minutes left, but when you think about what you've created and you've been transparent, I mean, you've become hugely successful, multimillionaire in what you're doing and helped other people do the same. I mean, you have some really tremendous success stories of those thousands of students who've learned from you. Looking back at all of that, you couldn't have planned it, but looking back at it, what do you think was the key to, we've talked about consistency, we've talked about the podcast. What about it do you love so much? And what do you see coming next? And can you see, or do you want to do more of the same?
What I love about business building and entrepreneurship so much is because I gravitate toward experiments, I get to collect new experiences and new skills all the time. I'm always learning new things from what I'm doing, from other people. I'm always meeting new people. And so I think that variety is really what keeps me going. And I'm expanding even into other things, right? So, like, I'm building now. Cubicle to CEO operates more as a media and education company, but I am angel investing in women-owned startups in industries and sectors that I personally would probably never launch a startup in, but I still want to learn that type of business. So I have investments in a tech company, in a beverage company, and in a health supplements company. I also am looking at buying a local retail business, a main street business here in my local community, because brick and mortar is an entirely different type of business that I also want to learn and kind of conquer. So as an entrepreneur, I really don't see myself as siloed in just this one thing that, I'm known for, but I really want to expand my skill set and understand business on a deep level across multiple different business models and industries.
What is the advice you'd give to someone? We talked about off air how, pivots, entrepreneurship is sometimes a daily decision
Yeah.
to keep doing what you're doing or shifting when you need to shift, to know when to pivot, learn from the mistakes, teach those hopefully to your students so they avoid them. And just with just 1 minute left, what would be your answer to that in terms of the advice you want to give someone who's wanting to give up but wanting to hang in there too?
Realize that your business at the end of the day, if you can remove the emotions and making, certain outcomes mean something about your worth or your value, if you can instead take a step back and look at whatever you're doing, almost like a scientist looks at an experiment in the lab, right? You have a hypothesis, you're testing this thing out, you anticipate the outcome will be XYZ. If it is different, right? No scientist looks at their experiment and goes, oh, wow, I'm not fit to be a scientist. I'm not worthy to continue running tests in the laboratory, right? They instead just look at that as data and they go, okay, what can I learn from this? My hypothesis was disproven. How can I come up with a different hypothesis to test again? And I think if you have that sort of mindset, it will allow you to keep going and move through those challenges, because you realize it's not about that you're not capable, right? It's just you don't have the full context yet. And the only way that you can is by moving forward.
Such good advice. Such
Thank
good
you.
advice. Well, I'm going to keep following you and I'm going to come to one of your in person events one of these times
Please.
when the dates all line up. So I appreciate you being here. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time. I appreciate your time. And I just think what you're doing is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.